Entire man caves dedicated to retro games, a 30th anniversary limited edition PS5 Pro with an old school design coming in November, and a single Pokemon card that sold for over $5 million. What do all these things have in common? A heavy infatuation with nostalgia. Millennials and Gen Z cannot get enough of items that remind them of their past, when times were simpler and your biggest worries consisted of what movie you would be renting from Blockbuster that weekend. Nostalgia has always been a powerful force for marketing new products, but never has it reached a level of obsession as it has with today's younger generations. So let's rewind the clock and explore the concept of nostalgia, why it's so influential, and why this fixation on the past could cause serious problems for our future. What exactly is nostalgia anyways? To some it might be the warm feeling you get when reminiscing on your youth. To others it might feel like regret from not realizing what you had until it's gone. But the most accurate definition would probably combine both of these experiences. The term nostalgia actually comes from the Greek words nostos, which means a desire to return home, and algos, which means pain. It is an oxymoron of feelings, like a fire that can both comfort you and burn you depending on how close you get to it. And there's an important reason why it exists in all of us. Christine Baccio, a psychology professor at Le Moyne College, has been studying nostalgia since the 1990s. It's even led her to develop a nostalgia inventory that assesses how prone you are to nostalgia. She's discussed her findings with a couple different outlets that you can find online now, like the American Psychological Association and the National Geographic, and in those posts, she highlights the importance of nostalgia from an evolutionary perspective. One of the biggest reasons we feel nostalgia is because it helps to unite a sense of who we are and our identities over time. Who we consider ourselves to be can change so much even over the course of just a few years, and this subconsciously terrifies us. Humans naturally want to be in control of their surroundings, and especially themselves, and by inducing nostalgia within us, our brains help to remind us of who we have been and compare that to who we are today to look for continuity, because continuity in our identity signals some sort of control. The added benefit of this is that it also influences us to increase our authenticity. By reminiscing on our youth with admiration, we realign with our childlike confidence to be who we truly were before the world told us who we were. Nostalgia is also an extremely social emotion because it helps connect us to other people. I'm sure many young people watching this can feel the sense of community that comes from watching Instagram reels or TikToks that depict what life was like in the 2000s or even early 2010s and reading all the comments about where the time has gone and how they wish they could be transported back to that time period. And God only knows the things I would do just to hear a Modern Warfare 2 lobby in my cheap $20 headset one more time. Nostalgia is part of what bonds us to the most important people and memories in our lives. Without those memories, we'd never know where those bonds came from, and this can actually act as a great boost to our well-being, according to research. But the positive benefits of nostalgia actually don't stop there. Research has also found that nostalgia can boost inspiration and creativity, make us feel more youthful, alert, optimistic, and energetic, and even encourage us to take risks and pursue our goals. It's clear that nostalgia for our past is crucial for making us want to continue on in this life. When we can look back at how far we've come and appreciate the journey, even though that appreciation will most likely come with the ever-looming knowing that you'll never be able to relive those memories again, that is when nostalgia acts as a positive force for change. But the problem arises when you're stuck in a singular phase of nostalgia, the phase that is most closely associated with that ever-looming knowing.
Now make all your cakes extra special.
You can get 12 fascinating issues of Zoo Book.
Chef Boyardee. Boy, this stuff is good.
Do you want the taste of mother's warm cooking on a cold winter's night, just like when you were a kid? Well, it all comes down to recreating that signature taste. So allow me to prepare a delicious home-cooked meal for you while explaining the sponsor of today's video, Graza. Graza is the highest quality olive oil at an affordable everyday price. It comes from a single origin in Hastings, Spain, when the olives reach their peak harvesting times. Using their two kinds of olive oils, drizzle and sizzle, you can transport yourself back to a simpler time with their distinct flavors of remembrance. While the sizzle is used for cooking in a pan or in the oven, the drizzle is used as a finisher, ensuring you get a clean, pungent, and pure flavor with every delicious bite. Just look at that opaque squeeze bottle design.
And when you run out, which you will quickly, all you'll need to do is grab a refill can from their website or your local Whole Foods. Beautiful, a well-balanced, evocative meal, just like how Mom used to make it. Immerse yourself in the vibrant, aromatic flavors of Graza olive oil and get 10% off your order by going to the first link in the description and using code COLE10 at checkout. Now, back to your regularly scheduled programming.
You know how I referred to nostalgia as an evolutionary process? Yeah, well, unfortunately that means nostalgia also comes pre-installed with a bit of delusion to help us survive. You may have heard of the term looking through rose-colored glasses before, and that's exactly what nostalgia is most of the time. When our brains recall past memories, they purposefully leave out most of the negative experiences of that memory as a means of survival. A good example of this is why you might think of a previous relationship that ended in brutal heartbreak with tender fondness. If you saw your past relationship for more of what it actually was, a never-ending string of arguments and disagreements, you may not have the optimism to try for love again, or even life in general. Sometimes it is the case that past memories of things like relationships are so bad that you become permanently turned off from the idea of pursuing another one. But more often than not, especially a few months post-breakup, our brain starts to conjure up a romanticized version of what life was like during that time with that person as a means to motivate us to keep moving forward. Yes, the past is often not as good as we thought it was, but what happens when your present reality has no evidence that things are going to get better anytime soon? Well, that's when you start heavily relying on escaping to this romanticized past. And can you guess when this has been most apparent in recent years? 2020, of course. A study in 2022 was conducted to show the relationship between nostalgic media use, escapism, and well-being during the COVID-19 pandemic. And they concluded that nostalgic media usage did increase during the pandemic, was positively associated with fear of isolation, and that it was related to both functional and dysfunctional escapism. Nostalgia is one of the most influential ways in which we cope with social isolation and disconnectedness because it helps with that identity continuity that I referenced earlier. When the world stopped and the young generations were no longer capable of maturing into adulthood like generations past, they looked to the past to confirm the continuation of their identity. Not only that, but by escaping to a time period where a crisis as heavy as COVID wasn't going on, they could cope with the disastrous effects it was having on the world. And this is where the problem of too much nostalgia starts to come to light, when it is no longer motivating you to create a better future, but rather convinces you that the only good future lies in the past. Consumer Insights platform found that Gen Z are the most nostalgic, with 15% feeling that they'd prefer to think about the past rather than the future. Millennials aren't much further behind at 14%, and the preference continues to taper off with age. Gen Z and millennials are driving nostalgia in the media too. Gen Z are in the lead again, with 50% of this generation feeling nostalgic for types of media, followed by 47% of millennials. So although every generation has nostalgia for their adolescent years, it's really Gen Z that is driving the trend today. And the reason why this shouldn't be surprising, especially if you are Gen Z. The pandemic disrupted our early development, the way we interact with each other at both school and our jobs, and sped up every form of wealth inequality. All natural disasters and crises, on top of COVID, are now being broadcast through social media and other mainstream media sources, causing an onslaught of negative information overload. So for the younger generations, a time that appeared to be simpler, calmer, full of more joy and less technology, is a refuge for a bleak present and potential future. But here's where it gets really interesting. What GWI also found is that a third of Gen Z are nostalgic for the 90s, despite the majority being born in the 2000s. And this is where I would like to introduce a new form of nostalgia that I haven't yet addressed: historical nostalgia. Unlike personal nostalgia, which is a longing for or feeling good about aspects of your life that you've already lived through and have stored in your memory, historical nostalgia is oriented towards nostalgia for history and society over the years, even if you've never lived in that time period. One of the most concrete examples of how this phenomenon of historical nostalgia plays out is in old music, and more specifically, Japanese 80s city pop. I'm a huge fan of this type of music, and I'll often spend hours playing it in the background depending on what I'm working on. And on almost every one of these videos on YouTube that are a Japanese city pop playlist, you're bound to find a comment that goes something along the lines of, this brings back nostalgia for a time I never experienced. Young people often go so far into this that they can create entirely fake memories of them living and enjoying their lives in the 80s without having ever actually experienced it before. As a British kid born in 2004, this really reminds me of strutting down the streets in Shinjuku in 1982 with my childhood sweetheart Sakura Momoka. We went to the city for a date and had the best udon of our lives. The present moment has gotten so unbearable for a lot of Gen Z that they're not even looking at the past with rose-colored glasses. They're looking at the past with alternate reality glasses. Because of economic hardships, technology, uncertainty, and a disdain for the present, I highly doubt that historical nostalgia in this way was as prominent in the past as it is today. As humans, we've always had a knack for escaping to and creating fantasy worlds, but consumerism has allowed us to make those escapism dreams into more of a reality. And companies are starting to tap into this psychological phenomenon in droves. All the largest brands in the world now have entire teams of psychologists and marketers who acutely understand the power of nostalgia and are using it to fuel their commodity campaigns. A study by consulting firm Kantar found 52% of 12 to 29-year-old consumers prefer classic brands. 81% of those young consumers also said they like it when brands bring back products and trends from their childhood. How is this playing itself out? Well, apart from the examples that I gave in the intro, other brands are now dipping their feet into the retro era selling point. Pepsi recently updated their logo to a style that was first unveiled in the 1970s. Hostess Brands was recently acquired for $4.6 billion, reflecting the pandemic-driven popularity of retro snacks like Twinkies, which first sold in 1930. 90s and Y2K fashion has also been making a big comeback. Fashion houses like Givenchy and Bottega Veneta featured 1990s grunge fashions in recent runway shows, and Levi's last year re-released its silver tab baggy jean, popular in the hip-hop and skating culture days of the 1990s. But perhaps the most popular use of market-driven nostalgia that's happened in recent years was the Barbie movie that came out in 2023. It generated over $1.4 billion in the box office and is expected to boost Mattel's profits by $125 million thanks to sales from toys and merch. As the present and future continues to hold no promises of a better life, more and more people will try to find a way to live as close as possible to an alternate time. I mentioned earlier that feelings of nostalgia most commonly come with rose-colored glasses, and that the past is often not as good as we thought it was. But I think this huge boom in the nostalgia market should be more of a warning than anything that the present moment might very well be objectively worse than other time periods, even if you take away the fact that we like to filter out the negative memories of our past. At face value, I know all this can seem quite grim, but I also genuinely think that this trend reveals something hopeful for the future. You see, Gen Z and millennials don't just get attached to nostalgic items because they evoke a feeling of calmness, comfort, identity, and community. They also value the attention to detail and positive progress that those items possess or represent. The best way I can explain this to you is through something I have a deep passion for: the computer game RuneScape and how it's evolved over the years. RuneScape is a point-and-click RPG game that has been around since 2001, but people usually consider the golden era of the game to be from around 2005 to 2007, when player counts peaked. Eventually, like most other companies, Jagex, the company behind the game, focused more on increasing profits rather than improving upon what already worked. They introduced microtransactions in the form of wheel spins and a brand new combat system. This effectively killed their game around 2012, causing nearly half of the player base to quit. But in 2013, a petition started to bring back the 2007 version of the game after Jagex said they had found a backup of it and were considering creating servers for it if enough people signed the petition. The signatures far surpassed the required amount to make it happen, and on February 22nd, 2013, the old school RuneScape servers officially opened up. The current version of RuneScape from the past, with all those crappy updates, still exists on separate servers, and it's now called RuneScape 3, but old school RuneScape still has more concurrent players than it over 10 years since its release. Why? Because old school RuneScape has stayed true to its roots, while still providing updates for the game that are voted on by the players themselves. So while it is no longer the exact game it once was in 2007, it still contains its core elements, but with modern updates, which is what most people really wanted out of the game as it moved forward in development. I give this long-winded gaming history lesson not just to shove my passion down your throat. Pause. I do it to highlight how this applies to our infatuation with nostalgia and how this reflects our overall attitude to how products are made now. Things really were simpler and often made better with more intention in the past. A lot of things were made with meticulous passion rather than a focus on the bottom line profits. More things felt creative and innovative without trying to get you to buy something and compete for your attention at every second. And if we can start to revert back to some of those principles of the past and apply them to modern day products, just like old school RuneScape did, we can create more of the things that these younger generations are really looking for when they turn to nostalgia, which is an emphasis on authenticity, passion, intention, and positive progress. This is also another key reason why people loved the Barbie movie so much. It wasn't just appealing to the women who grew up with Barbie, it also portrayed Barbie using the progress that has been made with the image of women since Barbie was first released. It's a theme I'm constantly promoting in my videos, taking everything that was positive and useful about the past, improving upon those things, and leaving behind what clearly didn't work. And if that is what we can start learning from nostalgia commodities, instead of solely using them as a way to profit off of miserable people trying to escape a murky future, then maybe commodifying nostalgia isn't all too bad of an idea. I like discussing topics that pertain to modern issues and how we can solve these issues with nice, like-minded people, and that's why I created a free self-improvement community. If you want to check that out, link in the description. If you want to watch another video like this, maybe on the Masculinity Crisis, and if you're nostalgic about traditional masculinity, maybe watch this video. See what you think. I'm headed out. Peace.